You know the drill. You're on a website and that little chat window pops up. But have you ever really stopped to think about who or what you'd rather have on the other end of that conversation? Well, thanks to some incredible research from the Journal of Consumer Psychology, we're about to dive into why, when things get a little personal, our preferences for humans versus machines get really, really weird.
All right, let's just imagine this for a second. You're shopping online, looking for something that's maybe a little sensitive. A specific health item, something you don't exactly broadcast to the world. And right then, the chat window appears. In that moment, who do you actually want to talk to? A real, live person or a super efficient chatbot? Now, I know what you're thinking. A human, of course. That's what most of us would say. But what the research found is that it's way more complicated than that. It all boils down to one of the most powerful human emotions there is, the deep-seated fear of being judged. Okay, so let's dig into the first big mystery here. What happens when you're not even sure who you're talking to? When a company is a little vague about whether it's a person or a program? Your brain has to make a quick guess, and it turns out just how embarrassed you feel completely changes the odds. And to really get this, we have to talk about something called error management theory. It sounds complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. When we're faced with a choice and we don't have all the facts, our brain doesn't try to make the most likely right guess. Nope. It's hardwired to avoid the mistake that would have the worst consequences. It's a survival instinct, basically. So let's apply that here. Think about the two ways you could be wrong. Scenario 1, you assume it's a person, but it's really a bot. So what? You were maybe a little extra polite. No harm, no foul. That's a low-cost mistake. But flip that around. You assume it's a bot, so you're super blunt about a really personal problem, and then you find out you were talking to a real person the whole time? Ouch. That is a high-cost error. We're talking maximum-level cringe. And that's exactly what the first study found. When the purchase was for something potentially embarrassing, people who felt more self-conscious were way more likely to guess that the agent was human. It's like our brain's own little defense mechanism. By assuming it's a person, we automatically become more guarded and protect ourselves from that soul-crushing embarrassment. Okay, so that's what happens when we're in the dark. But what about when the lights come on? When a company is totally transparent and says, hey, you're talking to our chatbot, or you're talking to Dave from customer service. Well, this is where our brains do a complete 180 and things get fascinating. Just look at these numbers. It's incredible. In one study, people had a choice of 2 online stores. When they were shopping for something totally normal, like hay fever medicine, a huge 91% chose the store with a human helper. Makes sense. But, and this is the kicker, when the product was something more private, like anti-diarrheal medication, bam, the preference completely flipped. A massive 81% of people actively chose the store with the chatbot. So what is going on here? Why the huge reversal? Well, the key is a cool psychological concept called mind perception. It basically says that we size up any mind, whether it's a person, an animal, or even a robot, on 2 different scales. The first is agency, its ability to do stuff like plan and take action. The second is experience, its ability to feel stuff, things like joy, pain, and, you guessed it, judgment. So when we look at another human, we see high agency and high experience. They can do things and they can feel things. But when we look at a chatbot, we see it differently. We think, okay, it has some agency, it can look up our order for sure, but we see it as having basically 0 experience. And that is the secret sauce. We don't believe a bot can feel embarrassment on our behalf because we don't think it can feel, period. It can't judge us, and when that threat of judgment is gone, poof, our own embarrassment just vanishes. So the solution seems easy, right? If you're selling something sensitive, just use a simple, clearly labeled bot. Case closed. But, psychology is never that simple. What happens when companies try to get cute and make their bots more friendly, more human? To figure this out, the researchers created 3 different customer service agents. First, you had your basic, no-frills bot. Speech bubble icon, robotic name, straight to the point. Then, they made a human-like bot. It had a friendly cartoon avatar, a normal name, and used warm, emotional language. And finally, you had a real person. And the results here were, wow. As you might guess, people were most willing to talk to the purely robotic bot. No surprise there. But the real shocker was the human-like bot. By trying to make it friendlier, they actually made people less willing to talk to it. It drove their comfort level way down, making it almost as unappealing as talking to an actual human. This quote from the study just nails it. When you anthropomorphize a chatbot, that's the fancy word for making it seem human, you completely ruin the one thing it's good for in these situations, All of a sudden, we're not so sure anymore. We start to think, wait, could this thing feel? Could it be judging me? And just like that, the fear of embarrassment comes rushing right back in.
So, let's bring this all home. What does this deep dive into our brains mean for the real world? How can we use this psychology to actually make things better for customers, especially when they're feeling a bit vulnerable?
And if you need one last piece of proof, this final study is it. This was a real interaction where people talked about their personal skin concerns. Afterwards, they were offered a free sample if they provided their email address. The result? The simple, obviously a robot chatbot cleaned up, getting almost 2/3 of the signups. People were just way more comfortable sharing personal info with a machine they knew couldn't judge them. So, after this whole journey into our weird digital psychology, what are the big takeaways? What should we remember from all this? Let's break it down.
Okay, here's the bottom line. First, when the topic is sensitive, we don't want a human and we don't want a bot that's pretending to be human. We want a simple, obvious bot. Second, the reason is that we feel safe with them. We believe they literally cannot judge us because they can't feel. Third, trying to make a bot all warm and fuzzy totally backfires because it brings that fear of judgment right back to the table. And finally, the big lesson is this. For these kinds of interactions, the best bot is a bot that's proud to be a bot.
And that really leaves us with a huge, fascinating question for the future, doesn't it? The entire tech industry is in a mad dash to make AI that's completely indistinguishable from a person. But what if, in doing so, we're accidentally erasing the one thing that makes it so uniquely helpful in moments like these? The simple, comforting fact that it isn't human at all. Something to chew on the next time a little chat window pops up.